What if I told you that the average person spends 40 years working only to retire with less money in the bank than a used car is worth? Yes, you heard that right. Imagine dedicating your entire life to showing up at the office, dealing with managers, emails, endless commutes, and still ending up at the finish line with barely enough to buy a secondhand sedan. Shocking? That's not even the scariest part. Here's the real mystery. How is it possible that millions of hardworking people earn salaries year after year, yet somehow arrive at retirement with financial cupboards nearly empty? It's as if we've all been following a script written by someone who doesn't want us to win. And today, I'm going to show you just how deep this rabbit hole goes. But I'll warn you, what you're about to hear will make you question everything you thought you knew about money. Let's start with the paycheck. The typical full-time worker in America pulls in around $55,000 a year. Sounds decent at first, right? But wait until Uncle Sam steps in with his scissors. Federal tax slices off a chunk, state tax takes another bite, Social Security nibbles, Medicare grabs its share. By the time the dust settles, most people are actually living on something closer to $37,000 to $42,000. Imagine pouring a tall glass of water, watching it fill to the brim, and then someone yanks away nearly a third before you even take a sip. That's reality. But here's where the real nightmare begins. Earning money is only half the battle. What matters most is what you do with it. And according to national surveys, the typical American has set aside just $70,000 for retirement. Stop and picture that number for a second. 70,000. That might sound like a decent pile of cash until you realize that's what people are expecting to live on for the rest of their lives. It's not even enough to buy a modest house in most cities. Now brace yourself for the first real shock. Roughly 1 in 4 people hasn't saved a single dollar for retirement. Zero. Nothing. It's like heading into a snowstorm without a coat, hoping someone else will keep you warm. And who do they expect to save them? Social Security. But depending on a government program that's constantly under financial stress is like building your dream home on top of sand dunes. It might hold up for a while, but eventually the cracks begin to show. Let's zoom in by age group because the picture gets even darker. Picture a 24-year-old at their first job, excited, optimistic, dreaming of their future. You'd expect at least a small nest egg to start forming. Yet the median savings for people under 25 is less than $2,000. That's about the cost of a used laptop or a vacation gone slightly over budget. By the time workers reach their early 30s, the number grows a bit, to around $15,000, but that still barely scratches the surface when you consider decades of expenses ahead. And when people finally reach what's supposed to be the golden years, the numbers don't shine much brighter. The median retirement balance for those over 65 hovers around $95,000. Now here's the gut punch. If you follow the classic 4% withdrawal rule, that $95,000 translates into about $3,800 per year. That's just over $300 a month. $300. You can't even cover a week of groceries and utilities with that, let alone healthcare, transportation, and all the little emergencies life throws at you. Imagine working for 4 decades, trading precious time for paychecks, only to retire with less monthly spending money than a teenager working part-time at a coffee shop. Picture sitting at your kitchen table in your 70s, counting pennies, choosing between heating the house or filling a prescription. That's not a retirement dream. It's a retirement nightmare. But here's where things get even stranger. If so many people are undersaving, overspending, and leaning on Social Security like a crutch, how exactly are they managing their daily lives right now? What does the average household spend each month? And how does it compare to what they actually bring home? The numbers will make your jaw drop. So, how much do households actually spend? According to recent surveys, the average family burns through about $6,000 every month. That's over $70,000 a year. Let that sink in. If the typical worker is taking home closer to $40,000 after taxes, but the typical household is spending $70,000, where on earth is that extra $30,000 coming from? The answer is both simple and terrifying. Debt. Credit cards, car loans, personal loans, and a never-ending cycle of borrowing just to keep the lights on. Imagine trying to fill a bathtub with the drain wide open. No matter how much water you pour in, it never fills. That's what daily life looks like for millions. Let's look at the breakdown. Housing alone eats up around $2,000 a month. And that's an average. In cities like San Francisco or New York, $2,000 doesn't even get you a closet with a window. Then comes food. Nearly $700 a month. Not outrageous until you multiply it by 12. That's more than $8,000 a year just on eating. Transportation takes another massive bite. Car payments, gas, insurance, maintenance, easily $1,000 a month. Add it up and you've already spent nearly $4,000 a month before you've even touched healthcare, education, clothing, or that sneaky little monster called entertainment. Here's where shock number 2 hits. The average household is lugging around over $10,000 in credit card debt. Now, 10 grand might not sound catastrophic until you peek at the interest rates. We're talking 20% or more. That means people are paying $2,000 every single year in interest alone, and the balance barely shrinks. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up while the floor tilts backward. No matter how fast you sprint, you're not actually moving forward. But it gets worse. Much of this debt doesn't even come from emergencies or medical bills. Studies show that a large slice of credit card balances comes from non-essential spending. Dinners out, impulse buys online, flashy gadgets that end up forgotten in drawers. Imagine spending thousands of dollars just to rent objects for a few months before tossing them aside. That's basically what high-interest debt turns everyday purchases into: short-term joy, long-term shackles. Now let's open another loop. If the average person is juggling debt, struggling to save, and spending more than they earn, what about their overall financial health? What's their actual net worth? The scorecard of everything they own versus everything they owe. I'll get to that in a moment, but first, I need to pause and ask you something important. You're here watching this video, which already makes you different. Most people never even stop to think about these numbers. They just live paycheck to paycheck, crossing their fingers that things somehow work out. But you're clearly searching for answers. So let's make a deal. If you're finding this eye-opening, hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. Not because I ask politely, but because the more people engage, the more the algorithm pushes this message in front of others who desperately need to hear it. Think about it. Your single click could be the reason someone finally wakes up before it's too late. And I'd love to hear from you directly. Drop a comment below answering this question. What's the most shocking number you've heard so far? Was it the $300 a month retirement income? The $10,000 in credit card debt? Or maybe something else entirely? I'll be reading through. And I'm curious to see which stat punches you in the gut the hardest. Because here's the thing. Once you know these numbers, you can't unsee them. They haunt you every time you swipe your card, every time you skip contributing to your savings, every time you tell yourself, I'll start being responsible next month. And that haunting feeling, it's actually good. It means you've woken up, and now you get to choose whether to go back to sleep or start building something better. Now, about that scorecard we mentioned, net worth. It's the most brutally honest number in your financial life. And for the average person, it's nowhere near where it should be. And when you see just how low it really is, you'll realize why so many people end up trapped in the same cycle generation after generation. So let's rip the bandage off. The median net worth for households in America sits at around $100,000. Sounds okay, right? Until you break it down by age. If you're under 35, the median is barely $15,000. Think about that. After a decade of working, most young adults have built up less wealth than the price of a modest used car. By the time people hit their mid-40s, the median rises to just under 90,000. In the 50s, it reaches around 170,000. And finally, for those approaching retirement, the figure peaks at about 250,000. Now here's the gut punch. If you retire with $250,000 in total assets, and you try to follow the conservative safe withdrawal rule of 4%, you'll only be able to spend around $10,000 per year. That's less than $900 a month. Imagine working for 40 years, waking up before dawn, commuting through traffic, sacrificing weekends, dealing with office politics, and after all of that, your reward is barely enough to cover groceries and utility bills. It's a cruel joke that no one laughs at. And yet, this is the reality for millions. Why? Because the average savings rate in America is just 6%. 6. That means for every $100 someone earns, only $6 is being tucked away. And out of that 6, much of it goes to short-term goals like buying a car or making a down payment on a home. By the time retirement savings get their cut, there's almost nothing left. Now let's add another layer. The average retirement age is 61. Sounds great, right? Retire early, live free. But here's the problem. Full Social Security benefits don't kick in until 67. That leaves a 6-year gap to bridge. And if you're living on that median savings balance, those 6 years are lean, painfully lean. Picture yourself at 61. You've finally broken free from decades of work, but instead of traveling, relaxing, or spoiling your grandkids, you're anxiously calculating whether you can afford meat at dinner or if you'll need to cut the cable bill just to get by. And don't forget this, someone who reaches 65 today can expect to live nearly 2 more decades. That means 20, maybe even 25 years of retirement to fund. That's longer than most people's entire childhood and education combined. Think about that. Decades of life with no paycheck coming in. How will you survive if you haven't prepared? Here's the twist, though. This isn't meant to paralyze you with fear. It's meant to wake you up. Because here's the truth. Beating these numbers is not as hard as it looks. You don't need a 6-figure salary. You don't need to invent the next smartphone or sell your company to Silicon Valley. All you need is consistency. If you save more than 6%, if you avoid toxic debt, if you invest steadily, even in something as boring as low-cost index funds, you will already be far ahead of the average. And the average, as we've seen, is shockingly low. Now, before we wrap up, I want to ask you something a little different. Drop a comment and tell us, what's your story? Are you just starting to save? Have you already crushed your debt? Or maybe you're somewhere in between, trying to claw your way out of the paycheck-to-paycheck grind. Share your journey. Why? Because there's someone else watching this video right now who feels completely alone, and your story might be the spark that keeps them going. And if you found this video valuable, don't just hit subscribe. Consider it joining a movement. This isn't just about watching another finance video. It's about building a community where people stop settling for average, where we cheer for each other's victories, where we trade lessons, and where we remind each other that we deserve more than scraping by. So hit that subscribe button, give the video a like, and join the conversation below. Tell us what you learned, what surprised you, and what you're changing starting today. Because you're not just a viewer, you're part of a group of people rewriting the story of money in their lives. And trust me, that's a story worth telling.